Good day, my name is Ilza and I want to tell you a bit more about the Kenya SAP HCM Payroll. This is developed by the EPI-USE HCM Payroll Country Versions team. EPI-USE has a number of country versions, as can be seen on this map, where Kenya is one of the country versions that is provided by EPI-USE. Let's have a look at the country version overview. The definition of a country version. It's the adaptation of SAP software to cover legal requirements and common local business practices. If we have a look at our EPI-USE country version characteristics, we see it's separate payroll programs that enable country-specific legal calculations. The configuration settings per country allow business rules to be different. Multiple solutions can exist in the same system at once. The EPI-USE country versions look and feel like SAP standard country versions. And we also have standard integration with other SAP modules like finance. Let's have a look at the country version components. First of all, we have a payroll driver that is used to execute the payroll. There are country-specific info types to maintain master data. There are maintenance views, that is configuration tables, where company-specific configuration can be done. We provide functions and operations, and within these functions and operations, legal deductions are calculated. We provide a payroll schema and rules. This schema controls the payroll processing. We also provided wage types, technical and model wage types that's specific to the country version. Further on, we provide payroll reports, all the standard payroll reports like remuneration statement, the wage type reporter, the FICO posting program, and the bank transfer preparation. Once the payroll is run, we provide a payroll cluster for each country version where payroll results are stored. And then last but not least, we provide all the legal reports that's needed for the specific country, the tax certificates, reports and interfaces, as well as social insurance reports and interfaces, as well as any other legal HCM reports. The features of the country versions are as follows. There are a lot of business benefits. First of all, it's a multi-country HCM payroll in a single system. It's highly configurable per country. There's seamless integration with other SAP modules. It's enabling the SAP best practices. The technical features. It is developed according to SAP localization guidelines. It's not affected by SAP support packs and it upgrades easily. Maintenance and support. There's ongoing maintenance and support with SLAs. There's a client portal with a ticketing system, downloading of patches, an online configuration guide is included, and user training option is also available. If we have a look at all the compliance features, we find the following. There's international processing, income tax calculations, social insurance calculations, legal payments and allowances, off-cycle payroll, statutory and legal reports and interfaces, multi-currency support. It's available in official languages, and there are also legal updates that are provided by EPI-USE. If we have a look at all the international processing features, we find all the standard SAP processing, payroll organization. We support different payroll periods. There's a standard absence valuation, time quota compensation, time wage type valuation, factoring, deductions, benefits, integration to compensation management, loans, data medium exchange, remuneration statements, the posting of payroll results to accounting, and wage type reporter. All of these are available in our solutions. Now that we had a look at all the different elements and characteristics of the country versions in general, let's have a look now specifically at Kenya and what the EPI-USE Payroll country version for Kenya has to offer. In the SAP Easy Access menu, you will find under Human Resources Payroll Africa, the Kenya Payroll menu, and this will be demonstrated in the next slide. The Kenya Payroll menu can be found under the standard SAP Easy Access menu. It is found under Human Resources, Payroll, Africa, Kenya, and there we see all the standard app options like payroll, where we find the standard options, the bank transfer options, we find the off-cycle options, and the subsequent activities we find reporting options, and also the standard info system and tools options and settings, and all of these are under Human Resources, Payroll, Africa, Kenya. The Kenya Payroll comes with a standard schema -KE0, and this can now be adjusted according to the client specific requirements. And for more on this schema and rules, see the next slide. The Kenya country solution is provided with a payroll schema. If we go to PE01, we find the schema, that's KE0. If we look at this, we can see there's a schema, and in there we have different sub-schemas that's related to Kenya. For example, KA4. We find functions that's related to Kenya, different functions. We also find standard functions and standard rules, as well as Kenya specific rules. So there's all the different functions, rules, operations, and all of this is found in the standard schema KE0 for Kenya. The Kenya payroll also comes with a number of functions and operations, and these functions and operations are used for legal calculations, and these are used in the payroll, and we will show you a bit more of this in the next slide. The Kenya country version also comes with a couple of functions and operations. If we go to transaction PE04, we will find that all of these will start with an _KE. So if you look at all the functions, we can see a list of all the Kenya specific functions for tax, social insurance, etc., and all the different operations to distribute wage types. So all of these are also provided, the functions and operations that is specific to Kenya. The Kenya income tax information is captured into an info type. All the information related to tax is stored in this info type, and we will show you more of this in the next slide. If we go to PA30, we go to maintain master data, we find our employee, and then we find info type 9744, which is the tax info type. If we look at this, we can see that there's information where we can put in a PIN number. And if we put in a number, the system will check that the number is not already assigned, and it will say, okay, this is already assigned, so it won't allow us to make a change to that employee. So we go out. If I go in again, so this number is linked one number per employee. If we look at the section category, we find that the employee can either be resident or non-resident. The type of employee can be a primary employee or a secondary employee. If the person is disabled and qualifies for tax exemption, it has to be specified as well with an exemption certificate number. So this info type is where I store that tax-related information for all my Kenyan employees. The Kenya-related information for tax is stored in tax tables, for example, like the tax rates, and this information is normally updated by an EPI-USE EPI-USE patches and are provided on a regular basis, and we will show you a bit more in the next slide. Let's have a look at the tax tables for the Kenya country solution. So if we go to transaction SM31, we will find that the table names start with /EPI-USE and then T7XA. For the African solutions, in table 03, we will find for country grouping 54, which is Kenya. There we find the options for resident and non-resident. If we look at table number 4, for 54, we find the primary and secondary employee options. And if you want to look at the tax rates, we find it in the table TR for Kenya, for the different categories. And here we see all the tax brackets. If we look at them, so it starts off with the lowest one, tax bracket 1, tax bracket 2, tax bracket 3, and you can also see it's date driven, so we can see what it was in a previous period. So these tables all form part of the tax tables for the Kenya country solution. The tax calculation in the Kenya payroll takes place in the tax schema -KE8, and this uses all the information stored in the info type and all the information in the configuration views, the tax functions, operations and rules to calculate the tax, and the information is stored in the results table in tax clusters, and we will show this to you in the next slide. Let's have a look at how tax is calculated in the payroll. Remember I said you will find the Kenya payroll and the option payroll, Africa, Kenya. Look at payroll, let's run a simulation. I've set up a variant. And if I run this variant and I open up the log, I move down to the section where the tax is calculated, and there's a function for tax calculation. If I double click on this, I can see all the input tables. If I go down, I see a log which explains step by step how the tax is calculated. For example, it starts with gross pay, but if I expand this, I can actually see where this or how this amount of gross pay was made up. And so, the next step, the 30% of cash pay, it shows exactly how that is calculated. It looks at my actual contributions, where do they come from, the permissible limit, if there was mortgage interest or homeowner savings plan, I would have found it here, but it's empty. Look at my benefits, and if I look at taxable pay, how that was made up, tax payable, and then if there's any personal or insurance relief, and then I can see how tax is calculated. And then in my output table, I will find all the tax-related wage types. If I look, there's my tax, total cash pay, all of the calculations, and these are all stored in these last 4 wage types, and these will be used in my iTax reporting as well. So the payroll log is there to show you exactly how the tax was calculated. The Kenya payroll makes provision for the following social insurances: Social Security, NHIF. It makes provision for pension, customer-specific pensions, as well as medical aid. The information for social insurances is stored in a social insurance info type, and in this info type, the information can be stored for SSI, for pension and medical aid, and this will be shown in the next slide. Let's have a look at our social insurance info type. So again, we go to PA 30. This time we look at info type 9745, social insurances. If we go into there, we find 3 tabs: SSI, pension and medical aid. Under the SSI, we can say if this is a valid contribution. We found our NSSF there. You can add a membership number, also a voluntary amount if that is applicable. We found the contributions to NHIF, and we can also add a NHIF membership number. Under the pensions tab, we've provided a sample pension. A Kenya specific, customer specific one can be specified, and we can also switch this contribution on or off. The same applies to medical aid. Sample medical aid is provided. This can be switched on or off, and in this case the customer has to set up their specific medical aid fund. So all of these are found in our info type 9745 for social insurance. All the social insurance rates are also stored in different tables, and in here one can specify wage types and values and contributions, and we will show a bit more in the next slide. Again, the social insurance information is configured in tables. There are a couple of tables for social insurances. I'll just show you some of them. For example, table, again, the XA for Africa 22. For Kenya, we find this for Social Security, pension, medical aid and NHIF. In here you will find some wage types that's linked to this, some other information. So it's set up for all the different sections, again different wage types. Then if you look at another table, table 23, we find in here, for example, Social Security. We find in the member contribution, if there were other contributions, we would find it here. And in the case of NHIF, there are different brackets again. Let's just look at a couple of them. You can see there's a bracket that's 150 member contribution, and it increases as the bracket increases. Also again, different dates. We also have a table 24. In here we specify the employee and employer portion. In this case it's just 100% employer portion. For example, let's look at the pension fund again. We can see there's the employer portion, and we can also see if it's an amount or a percentage. So all of these tables gives one the option to set up your own funds, your own specifications. The social insurance calculations in the payroll happens in schema-KE7. It uses all the information from the info type. It uses all the operations, the functions, the rules, and the calculations are then stored in the payroll results in different SI clusters. See more of this in the next slide. Let's have a look at our payroll again. We run the payroll for the same employee. We expand the log until we get to the section where social insurances are calculated. In here we can see the different options. So if we expand here for NSSF, we look at the input table. It shows us the information from the info type. If I look at the processing, I can actually expand and see exactly where these amounts and how they were calculated, and even the tables that was used for this. So the same applies to NHIF. I can look at the input table, what was specified for NHIF. If I look at the processing, again, here's the wage types. How were they calculated? If I just go down, it shows the exact calculation and the information from the different tables. And if I look at the output, I can see how these wage types now were added to my input table for NHIF. And the same applies for pension and medical aid. Input table again, the processing, which can be expanded with the different tables, where it comes from. And the output again shows me my pension fund wage types that are now added. And the same applies for medical aid. If I look at the processing, I can actually see how it was calculated. And in the input table, I can see the wage types now added for medical aid as well. So all of this is shown here in the log of the payroll, the calculations for social insurances. The Kenya payroll makes also provision for company car information to calculate taxable benefits. There's an info type that specifies body type, the type of car cost, and this is all stored in info type 9746, and then the payroll will calculate the taxable benefit, and we explain this in the next slide. The information for company car is stored in info type 9746. If we have a look at this info type, we will see there's information for body type with different options. There are options for the type of car cost, and these are all stored in configuration tables. Then there's information needed for the license plate number, the car make, the engine size, as well as the car value, and this is all stored in this info type. If you want to run a payroll now for this employee, we can also go into the log, down to the section for tax, and there we will find an option for the benefit of company car. If we double click, we will see the information from the info type is stored in this internal table. If we look at the processing, we see the value of the car benefit, and if we expand this up to the last screen, we can see the table where the information was read from, the configuration table, and we can actually see how this amount was made up. It uses the entry from the table. We look at the prescribed rate, and then it uses the greater of those. So it shows us exactly how this was calculated, and then in the output we can see the wage type that was created, wage type 440, and all of this information is also stored in this internal table, which will be used in the iTax interface. So all of this can be found in the payroll log for company car. The Kenya Payroll also makes provision for a housing info type to calculate the housing benefit. This info type is info type 9747, and all the specification needed for housing, the type of housing, the rent, etc. is captured here, and then the payroll will calculate the taxable benefit. We explain this in the next slide. The housing info type is info type 9747. If we look at this info type, we also find a number of options. The type of house, type of housing is found there. If you have more than one, it will give an object ID. You can specify the rent that's paid by the employer or the market-related rent, the rent paid by employee, and you can enter a wage type whether the rent deduction should go to. If we have a look at the payroll and we want to see how housing is calculated in the payroll, we again go down to the section on tax, and we found this section on taxable benefit of company housing. If we go in here, we can see the input again, the information from the info type. We can see how the different wage types, what the value of their value are, but we can also see how these were calculated. So we can expand it until the end. We can see the configuration table that was used, the whole calculation, how it calculates the different values up to the end and all the different wage types. And these wage types are then stored also in the input table, and we find them all here, the value of housing, the rent, etc. And here we also find this table with the information that is stored that will be used also in the iTax interface. So for housing as well, we find the complete log in the payroll, and it explains exactly how the housing benefit is calculated. The Kenya Payroll also makes provision for the following functionality. There's gross up functionality, there's some off-cycle processing, and it also caters for non-monthly payrolls. The Kenya Payroll also makes provision for the iTax interface. This is an interface that is to be submitted on a monthly basis. The payroll will calculate everything that's needed, like the total cash pay, non-cash benefits, fringe benefit tax on low-interest loans, the defined contribution retirement, and owner-occupied interest. And all of these information is then downloaded into the iTax interface. And we will show this in the next slide. Let's look at the iTax interface. We've run a payroll for this employee for January 2017. We ran the P10 interface for iTax for January for this employee. We can first do the output options, the HR application log, which will show us exactly for this employer PIN all the sheets that were completed. In this case, sheet B, there's only one employee. So in sheet D, so there are two sheets that's relevant for January. We can do then a PC download or a server download. We specify a path where we want to download these sheets. So once we run that, we can check that, and we can see there's a sheet B and a sheet D on this date. If we open up our return, we fill in all the information, the employer's detail, the date. We do next, and we know now that we have a sheet B, so we can import sheet B, select it, and sheet B will be completed for us. We do not have a sheet C. We do have a sheet D, so we can import sheet D as well. So it updates for us all our sheets, and It shows us the tax that's due, we can validate it, and we can upload our iTax 10. So the whole process is catered for. Apart from the iTax interface, there's also the P9 tax deduction card, and this is also available as part of the Kenya payroll reports. And we will show this in the next slide. Okay, if we've seen, we can run P10, but we can also have the option of running the P9, that is an annual report. So if we select our period, this is the year 2017. We can run it for all our employees. In our scenario, we have one employee. If we run the card, we can see for this employer, there are the different pages, all the employees that's selected. It shows all the information that's going to be used. And once we're happy with that, we can run the PDF. And we can do a print preview first. And here it shows us the PDF format, and as we only have information for January, it's only filled in the January, but it will do a selection of all the employees and a document for each one, and we can either save or print this. So the I-10 and the I-9, or the P10 and the P9, both are provided for in our Kenyan solution. The P10 and the P9. As part of EPI-USE support options, we provide a country version client portal where tickets can be logged per client or per product, and then these issues will be addressed. And this forms part of the maintenance contract that EPI-USE forms with the client that wants to use our country versions. We provide a configuration guide, and in this document you can find lots of information, all the tables, all the config that's needed. It shows you exactly what you need to do, the tables, the functions, explain how everything is done, the wage types that are used, the constants. So all of this can be found in this configuration guide, and that comes with the solution. Thank you so much for joining us on this demonstration of our Kenya payroll. We would love to hear from you, so please kindly contact us and we would give you more detail. Looking forward to speak to you soon. Thank you.